Welcome to our meditation class. We're in this series called Freedom from Painful Emotions. And today's topic is going to be moving beyond depression. If you're new to this class, my name is Gem Kelsang Chogden. I'm the resident teacher here at Kadampa Meditation Center, Maryland, where we're recording this class for your benefit. And the first thing we're going to do is to meditate so that we can bring some mental peace into our mind and also learn how to meditate in a qualified way such that we can gain the power to make changes in our mind. There are many types of meditation out there. Many of them are geared for momentary relaxation, which is, of course, quite wonderful. But Buddhist meditation is designed to help us to be able to make changes in our mind so that we can recognize, reduce, and eventually eliminate all of the painful thoughts and feelings which cause us so much suffering. And also that we can develop minds that lead us to greater peace and happiness, and eventually so that we can keep our mind peaceful and happy all the time. So that's the benefit of practicing Buddhist meditation. So when we meditate, we go through 4 steps: seeking and finding our object of meditation, which we do through listening to the instructions about what the meditation is, and then we hold it in the center of our attention, relax, and remain focused on it for as long as possible so that we can mix our mind deeply with our object of meditation, which then will help us to make changes within our mind. So if we lose our object of meditation because we got distracted and followed another thought, or heard a sound or something like that, bodily sensation disturbed us, we simply release our attention from whatever we followed and then go back and repeat the steps of seeking and finding our object of meditation, and then holding it in the center of our attention in a relaxed way and remaining focused on it for as long as possible. So our object of meditation that we're going to practice these steps with, to begin with, is a meditation that prepares our mind to listen to teachings and also engage in meditations related to the teaching. So we're going to focus on the feeling that our breath is making just inside the tip of our nose as we breathe in and out in a completely normal way. So I'll guide you into that meditation. First, find a comfortable posture, meditation posture, with your back straight. If you're in a chair, if your back isn't completely straight, use a small cushion behind it so that your back can be more straight, and have your feet firmly planted on the ground, not crossed in any way, unless you want to sit cross-legged in a chair. If you're on a cushion, have your hips higher in the back than in the front, and any cross-legged position that's comfortable is good. If you can get into what's known as half vajra, which is 1 foot on the opposite thigh, and remain comfortable in that position, that's a very stable meditation posture. You may want to place your hands in the traditional meditation posture of right hand on left, with thumbs touching, tucked close to your abdomen. This meditation posture represents the perfect concentration that highly realized meditation masters have, which give them the power to attain the higher realizations, such as permanent liberation from suffering in the state of full enlightenment. So we're creating the causes to attain better and better concentration when we use this meditation posture. Have your head well balanced over your straight back, tilted down just a little bit, with your eyes lightly closed, looking comfortably down the bridge of your nose. And if you're able to, have your eyes a little bit open, letting some light in so you stay more alert during meditation. If your eyelids flutter like mine do, then lightly closed is perfectly fine. Place your tongue resting against the back of your upper teeth so that your mouth will stay moist during meditation. Now check your body for any little points of discomfort and move a little bit to make some adjustments. The next step is to create an intention to follow the steps of meditation, seeking and finding the feeling that our breath is making just inside the tip of our nose as we breathe in and breathe out in a normal way. That feeling is a little bit cooler as we breathe in and a little bit warmer as we breathe out. And it's always there because we're always breathing. So it's a very easy meditation object to seek and find, which allows us to spend most of our time in the next two steps practicing holding that feeling in the center of our attention and ignoring everything else that's also appearing to our mind. That's a very important part of being able to focus on our object of meditation. We just don't want to pay attention to anything else that's appearing to our mind. It doesn't matter that other things are appearing. We just don't want to follow them. And we remain focused on the feeling of our breath for as long as possible. And if we lose our object of meditation, we repeat the steps. It doesn't matter how many times we have to do that. Each time we do it, it's a practice session. We're training our mind to meditate. And we want, as part of our intention, to benefit all living beings by bringing mental peace into our mind. With our intentions, then we can move our awareness using our imagination to our heart center, which is in the center of our body at the level of our heart. It's not our biological heart, but it's the location of where our root mind is, and all of our other minds arise from that. So when we place our awareness there, we can easily watch our thoughts. And from among the many thoughts that are appearing to our mind, which include sensations, we can seek and find the feeling that our breath is making just inside the tip of our nose, keeping our breathing natural. And when we find it, focus on it, hold it in the center of your attention, relax, and remain focused on it for as long as possible. pause and enjoy any greater mental peace you've been able to create within your mind. This mental peace is an indication of our completely pure potential and connects us with holy beings. If you wish, you can open your heart to receive blessings in the form of lights and nectars. And your mental peace will increase. The stronger your belief that this is happening, the more peaceful feeling you'll experience. As you gently come out of meditation, try to sustain whatever mental peace you're experiencing. Welcome again to our class. So today's topic is moving beyond depression. And I'm teaching from 2 books, How to Solve Our Human Problems and How to Transform Your Life. So both of these books are given to us by our lineage holder, who's in the picture behind me, Venerable Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche, a fully qualified Mahayana meditation master. How fortunate we are to have encountered such a great being. And that's due to his kindness that we have a correct instructions and an opportunity to transform our mind from experiencing so much problems and sufferings to a state of pure peace and happiness and complete freedom from suffering. So that just depends on our own choice. We have this opportunity because we have a qualified lineage holder and qualified teachings which show us how to do this. So it's important to move beyond depression. In our country and in the world, depression is one of the terrible sufferings that people experience. 6.7% adults actually have very serious depression, and 19.4% of adolescent girls and 6.4% of adolescent boys also suffer from depression. And there's a form of chronic but more mild depression that 1.5% of our population experiences every year, and particularly young people. So we have to understand that there are different types of depression. There are milder depressions, and then there are major depressions. There are psychotic depressions, there are manic depressive illness, there's postpartum depression, there's hormone-related depression related to women's periods, and seasonal affective disorder. Affective disorder means depression, seasonal depression. So all of these have been defined, and it's so important to understand that we can give ourselves protection from becoming depressed. So for the more serious depressive diseases like manic depressive illness, we not only want to use these teachings, but we also want to get medical help, since there are some medications that help give us protection. And in our tradition, we act according to society, and it's very important to get appropriate medical treatment and to take appropriate medication, that's prescribed. But we can give ourselves a lot of protection from triggering depression, if we understand how depression begins to develop in our mind. So a lot of times people think, well, it's just in my genes. You know, it's a genetic problem, okay? But what is a genetic problem? It's basically our karmic tendencies, which are playing out from the karma that we ourselves have created in our past lives that predispose us to be born into a family that has this genetic predisposition. So it's still a matter of understanding that everything that appears in our life is because of our own past actions, which give us, if we understand that, it gives us tremendous power to make changes in this life so that we don't carry these predispositions to our future lives. So Venerable Geshe Kelsang says in How to Solve Our Human Problems, all our problems are unpleasant feelings. Okay, so basically our problems are unpleasant feelings. Come from our delusions, okay? Particularly, they come from our delusion of uncontrolled desire, which is an attachment, and from self-cherishing. Okay, and also these delusions are the main cause of our problems. Okay, so delusions are unpeaceful states of mind that cause our mind to be uncontrolled and cause us to harm ourselves and harm others and create our future harm through the law of karma. We have strong attachment to the fulfillment of our own wishes. So check this out in your own life. Particularly think of times when you have been struggling with some discouragement or depressed feelings. We have strong attachment to the fulfillment of our own wishes, and for this aim, we work very hard throughout our life. I think that's true. We're all trying to fulfill our wishes, and we experience many difficulties and problems in our life. When our wishes are not fulfilled, we experience unhappiness and depression, which often causes us to become angry, creating more problems for both ourselves and others. And sometimes it's when we get angry that we're so disappointed that things didn't work out the way we wanted them to work out, that we begin to blame ourselves, return that anger inside and blame ourselves, and we can start a depressive cycle in that way. Okay. When we lose our friends, jobs, status, or reputation, and so forth, we experience pain and many difficulties. Why does that happen? Venerable Geshe Kelsang gives us a very simple answer. This is because of our strong attachment to these things. In other words, we think that those things, our friends, jobs, status, and reputation, are the sources of our happiness. And when inevitably we experience change in our life, then we feel as if our source of happiness is disappearing. And we have painful feelings because now we're not fulfilling our wishes. We're experiencing problems and difficulties, and things aren't going our way. And so we get very unhappy, and it's very easy when we're unhappy to trigger depressed thinking, blaming ourselves for things not working out. He said if we did not have such attachment, there would be no basis for experiencing suffering and problems at their loss. So that is a really profound statement. One of the advantages of really challenging our uncontrolled desire, or this idea that external things and people and situations are the source of our happiness, is that it causes us so much suffering because we can't, there's so many different causes and conditions that go into what happened to us in life. We can't control those things. So we're setting ourselves up for depression if we're actually thinking these external things like friends, jobs, reputation, and so forth are the source of our happiness, particularly our relationships. He says, when things go wrong in our life and we encounter difficult situations, we tend to regard the situation itself as our problem. Okay? But actually, the reason we tend to regard the situation itself as our problem is that we're, again, through attachment, thinking that having it our way is the source of our happiness. And so now something's going wrong and we feel like we're losing our source of happiness. Okay? But in reality, he continues, whatever problems we experience come from the side of our mind. That's really important. Whatever problems we experience come from the side of our mind. If we were to respond to difficult situations with a positive or peaceful mind, they would not be problems for us. So a positive and peaceful mind is the opposite feeling of the unhappiness and disappointment and depressed thoughts that appear when we feel entitled for something to be a source of happiness for us. He even gives us a bigger challenge. He says, indeed, we may even come to regard them, he's talking about the problems, as challenges or opportunities for growth and development. And in fact, we've all had that experience. We've all encountered some difficulty, like a separation. Maybe a relationship didn't work out. And at the time, it was very painful, and we may have gotten depressed, and we may have had a period of great unhappiness. And then gradually, we put our life together. We begin to feel better. We move on, and we begin to think, oh, you know, it's really good I'm out of that relationship. I've learned a lot from that relationship. You know, it helped me mature, and now I'm going to choose a different type of partner, you know, so that I don't repeat the same mistakes. It's actually a very important to remember how many things that appeared to be problems and made us unhappy that actually turned out to be real assets in our life. Sometimes losing a job, we thought the end of the world was coming because we lost a job. And then eventually we put it back together, we find a different job, and we like that job so much better than the one we had. And there's so many situations like that. Try to challenge yourself to remember them in your life. Problems arise, he says, only if we respond to difficulties with a negative state of mind. Therefore, if we want to be free from problems, we must transform our mind. In other words, we need to approach things differently. Okay. So one of the things we need to approach differently is our normal attitude that we're at the center of the universe, because that entitles us to feel like we should get anything that we find attractive that we think is a source of happiness for us. And we feel like life should happen according to me. You know, I should never encounter problems. I should never encounter sickness. I should never encounter suffering. I shouldn't have to be in social isolation. I shouldn't have to wear masks. You know, I shouldn't have to, you know, think about the welfare of others. I mean, our self-cherishing mind makes us as if we're in a world of one, and the function of everybody else in that world is to take care of us, to actually make us happy. That's the uncontrolled desire that stems immediately from this idea that somehow everything centers around us. I mean, in a way, we can all relate to that because we've all had this mind for countless lifetimes, and to a greater or lesser degree. And we can see some people who have it to a greater degree, who feel like they can do anything they want. They can tell any lie they want to tell, for example, to try to cover over their behavior. You know, and they have this idea that they're the greatest and the best and so forth. And we all know people like this. And they have very difficult lives. And they make lives very difficult for others who are in their close circle. You know? So maybe you have someone in your family like this, so that you try to think of someone you know so that you can make this real for you. So that's having very strong self-cherishing, which of course is the cause of many negative actions, harmful actions towards others, and creating terrible karma. So we always have a lot of compassion for people like this because they're creating their own future suffering as well as their present suffering, because whatever is done for them is never enough, you know. So they're always miserable underneath it all. So we have to really think through that, you know. The Venerable Geshe Kelsang says, of all the innumerable conceptual thoughts that arise in the ocean of our mind, it's interesting to think about this as just thoughts. The most harmful is self-cherishing. So that's that obsessive self-concern. And the most beneficial is cherishing others. So we've got an immediate remedy that we can apply. So I think this is really important. He defines self-cherishing. He thinks it's our mind that thinks I'm important while neglecting others. That's a simple definition, but I think it sort of hits the nail on the head, you know. And we can think of many times in our life when we feel that way, you know, like I really deserve to get what I want. I want to have it my way. I want to do what I want to do, you know. And that sets us up for so much disappointment and so much anger and so much depression, you know. Because then when we're on top of the world when things go our way, and then if we don't get something our way, then we crash. And then we feel, you know, something's wrong with me, that I couldn't make this happen. And we start to blame ourselves and beat up on ourselves, you know. So we've got this mind of anger that we're aiming at ourselves. So when we're feeling like we're the best person in the world, and when we're feeling like we're the worst person in the world, it's still that mind of self-cherishing operating, because we're blaming ourselves for not being able to sustain this unrealistic idea that I'm the best person in the world, you know. He says in How to Solve Our Human Problems, in reality, most of our emotional problems are nothing more than a failure to accept things as they are. In which case, and this is very important because this is one of the remedies for depression, it is patient acceptance rather than attempting to change externals that is the solution. So what is patient acceptance? That's to wholeheartedly accept whatever is happening without wanting it to be something other than what it is. In other words, without wanting it to be my way. Our self-cherishing mind tells us everything should be our way. But when we challenge our self-cherishing mind and we chip away at it gradually, we begin to think, oh, join the human race. You know, things don't work out for a lot of people, and now it's my turn for something not to work out. So I don't have to blame myself. I did what I could do to try to make it happen, but it didn't happen the way I wanted it to happen. So there's no need in criticizing myself or feeling depressed or feeling angry. It's just the way life is. So when we move to that position where we understand, you know, I'm no more important than you are. I'm no more important than any living being. You know, your happiness is as important as my happiness. Your suffering is as important as my suffering. In Buddhism, we call that equalizing self with others. Then we realize, of course, we're not going to have things happen the way we want them to happen. And that we actually have to work with others to reach compromises to fulfill their wishes as well as trying to fulfill our wishes. And when we have that attitude of working with others to reach compromises so that everyone can have something that they want, or we understand that my suffering is no more important than anyone else's suffering. Of course, I lost my job, but many people lose their job, you know, or my partner walked out. Well, many people's partner walks out. I'm no exception. These things happen. You know, my best friend died. These things happen all the time to people. I'm not the only one. The depressed mind, the self-cherishing mind, which results in the depressed mind, thinks I'm the only one that these things are happening to. You know, I'm the worst person in the world. It goes to this extreme exaggeration of thinking about how horrible we are and that nothing ever works out for me. When something happens, it's completely normal. Normal in the lives of many, many people. But we're exaggerating it in the depressed state as if we're the only one that it ever happened to, and we are to blame that it happened. You know, we drive ourselves down, 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 down into depressed thinking, you know, and then, you know, sometimes we even get suicidal and think, you know, I just got to be relieved of this suffering. And of course, committing suicide only makes things worse for us because our mind doesn't stop simply because we killed the body of this life. Now we've incurred the act of killing, which then will propel us into a lower rebirth, like an animal rebirth of even greater suffering. So suicide's no solution at all. It's just our self-cherishing mind which says, you know, I didn't get what I want. I'm having a temper tantrum. I'm making myself feel horrible, and I need an out. And of course, when we're thinking of committing suicide, or we actually try to commit suicide, or we actually achieve committing suicide, we're hurting many people. We're hurting our family. We're hurting our friends. You know, we've committed harmful acts towards many people who will have to contend with this type of suffering of having lost a child who committed suicide, having lost a partner who committed suicide, having lost a brother who committed suicide, having lost a sister, and so forth. It's such a terrible act that we can commit, and it all comes from the delusion, that distortion in our mind, that somehow we're so special that we should have had everything the way we wanted it. And now things aren't going my way, and I am thinking in such a way related to this self-cherishing mind, which makes me so now special bad, you know, that I'm the worst, most horrible person in the world, and the world would be better off if I committed suicide. I mean, this is the type of thinking that depression can drive us to. Depression is always a delusion. And if this type of thinking triggers our biologic potential for depression, because this type of thinking will trigger a biological response to depression. Because then we'll have the symptoms of depression, lose our appetite, we'll not be able to sleep. We'll wake up at 4 in the morning with these depressed thoughts. We'll be slowed down. We can't think clearly. All these things are the biological aspect that we can trigger with this way of thinking. So we need to give ourselves protection. We need to understand that this attitude that I should get what I want is completely harmful to us. Venerable Geshe Kelsang says, controlling our self-cherishing is of great value, even temporarily. All worries, anxiety, and sadness are based on self-cherishing. The moment we let go of our obsessive concern for our own welfare, our mind naturally relaxes and becomes lighter. That's what we all want. Even if we receive some bad news, if we manage to overcome our normal self-centered reaction, our mind will remain at peace. Many people get bad news. There's nothing unusual that we get bad news. And if we understand that, then we can practice patient acceptance to wholeheartedly accept whatever's occurring without wanting it to be something other than what it is. In other words, without wanting it to be my way. We then can practice this patient acceptance in our mind. As Venerable Geshe Kelsang says, just as there's room in the sky for a thunderstorm, so there's room in the vast space of our mind for painful feelings. So we're all going to experience painful feelings because we're all going to have a lot of suffering and problems in our life. That's the nature of the cycle of impure life that we're all trapped in. And just as a storm has no power to destroy the sky, unpleasant feelings have no power to destroy our mind. So the feelings themselves don't destroy our mind. It is our self-cherishing, our attitude towards those feelings that cause us to feel worse and worse and worse. When painful feelings arise in our mind, so this is a remedy, something that we all need to practice when we get really bad news or when something happens in our life that's a form of suffering. So instead of having depressed thoughts, this is a way to protect our mind. When painful feelings arise in our mind, there is no need to panic. So a lot of times we do panic, particularly if we have a history of depression. When we're really unhappy, we get terribly frightened because we know the thought tracks, the automatic thoughts that our mind is capable of, which will drive us into suicidal depression, for example. So those thought tracks are just habits. They're habits that we need to break by not thinking them. We have to really challenge ourselves. Can't go there. I am not going to think those thoughts. Those thoughts just cause me to experience more pain and suffering. Instead, I'm going to practice patient acceptance for the painful feelings in my mind right now. So he says, we can patiently accept these painful feelings, experience them, and investigate their nature. That's quite a different approach. And where they come from. When we do this, we will discover that painful feelings do not come from outside of us. In other words, it wasn't the bad news we got or the changes in our life that make it more difficult, but arise from within our own mind. So it's what we did inside our mind in relation to those external things. Our attachment to having things our way caused us to be incredibly disappointed. Circumstances or other people have no power to make us feel bad. The most they can do is trigger the potentials for painful feelings that already exist within our own mind. These potentials or karmic imprints are the residue of the negative actions we ourselves created in the past, which we performed because our mind was under the control of delusions, like the delusion of self-cherishing, feeling like I should get things my way. And so I insisted on getting things my way, and I harmed a lot of people, or a lot of animals, or living beings. You know. All of which stem, from our self-cherishing and our self-grasping ignorance, which we were teaching about on Saturday's retreat when we were looking at Buddha's teachings on emptiness and the context of the Great Mother, a practice to remove obstacles from our mind. Very, very lovely retreat. By patiently accepting painful feelings without clinging to them, that's the key. Our attachment will cling to painful feelings. Anyone who has any history of depression knows that there's something appealing about thinking all those negative thoughts about oneself. We have attachment to our negative thoughts. We have attachment to following those automatic thoughts in our mind, which drive us into depression. The part of ourself that can beat up on ourselves is so ingrained, and it feels comfortable because we're used to it. But now it's the time to change. We don't have to think those thoughts. It's so important to understand that we have control. We can gain control of our mind if we follow these teachings, and if we take them to heart. We can challenge our self-cherishing mind that loves to make us miserable. By patiently accepting painful feelings without clinging to them, the negative karmic potentials from which they arose are purified. How wonderful. And we won't have to experience that karma again. So we may have other examples where similar karma ripens, but that particular karma that ripened won't happen again if we practice patient acceptance. There is an enormous difference between the thought, I am feeling bad, or I am depressed, and unpleasant feelings are arising in my mind. When we identify with our feelings, we make them bigger and more solid than they are. And it becomes far more difficult to let the unpleasant feelings go. So we've all had that experience. So it's very important how we talk to ourselves. Rather than saying, I'm worthless, you say, I have some thoughts that are in my mind that are saying I'm worthless, but I'm not going to believe them. That's just delusions in my mind. Those are automatic thought habits. I don't have to pay attention to them. On the other hand, when we learn to view our feelings in a more detached way, seeing them simply as waves in the ocean of our mind. In other words, they're just thoughts. Delusions have no arms nor legs and, no skill, okay, and no courage. And Shantideva asks us, this is a Shantideva comment, he says, how have they made me their slave? It's a really good question. How have the thoughts in my mind terrorized me so much? They are just thoughts that have accompanying feelings. And I can identify by watching the mind the ones that are painful, and I can learn to recognize, reduce, and eliminate them. And I can recognize thoughts in my mind that are very beneficial, and I can learn to increase and fill my mind with beneficial thoughts. So how do we do this? Well, we just have to establish some new habits. So here's some practical ideas that you can do within your mind when you start to be depressed. So we should have some. Again, technical issues always arise when we're trying to do something, obstacles. When obstacles arise, I get stronger, Venerable Geshe Kelsang says. So it's always wonderful to have that opportunity. Okay, back to these practical ideas of what to do in our mind instead of follow those depressed thoughts. Okay. So, and we have to do this early. We have to catch depression early, the depressed thoughts when they're starting, the unhappiness when it's starting, when something doesn't go our way. We have to say to ourselves, now, wait a minute. This is my self-cherishing that feels entitled to have something my way. I need to reduce that. You know, I am not the most special person in the world. I am not an exception to suffering in the world. Many people are suffering in the same way that I am. So I'm going to view this suffering as a form of purification. Okay, I'm going to practice patient acceptance and tolerate this disappointment. And I'm going to do something constructive while I'm experiencing the disappointment. One thing I'm going to do is open my heart so that I can receive powerful blessings for inner peace and for increasing, moving away from discouragement. I'm going to actually make prayers to holy beings. Please help me to subdue these painful thoughts and to get over this disappointment and open my mind to receive blessings in the form of white lights and nectars and yellow lights and nectars that help me to purify my mind and increase my positivity. So that's one very powerful thing to do, is to rely on the holy beings. I mean, they understand that we're suffering all the time, and they're there to help us by bestowing mental peace and emanating whatever we need. So if we turn to them when things go wrong in our life, you know, instead of just closing our mind to everything and following our painful thoughts, which drive us into depression, you know, we'll receive some help if we really believe that we can rely on holy beings. It's very powerful. Also, we can realize that many, many people are suffering the painful experience of depression. So I'm going to practice what we call in Buddhism, taking and giving, okay? So I'm going to use my imagination that I am taking on the suffering of all the people who have depression, and I am completely freeing them from their depression. And I'm really going to focus on that as a belief. It's a correct belief. It doesn't matter whether it's actually happening or not. If we are doing this sincerely in our mind and imagining that we are taking on the suffering of everyone, we can imagine that it comes in the form of dark smoke and fills our mind and destroys our self-cherishing mind, the mind that caused us to get depressed in the first place when we felt like we didn't get something our way. Okay, so important that we imagine that we're taking on all this suffering of everyone else. And then we feel, I've destroyed my self-cherishing too. How wonderful. And we just feel, to the best of our ability, a mind of rejoicing that we've relieved the suffering of everyone who's depressed, and we've destroyed our own self-cherishing. So we have to do this meditation over and over again and become familiar. It's good to do it when you're not depressed, so that you have it clear in your mind when you are depressed. There are instructions on how to do this and how to transform your life, or in 8 Steps to Happiness, or Universal Compassion. This is a very effective and wonderful meditation for healing, and it works with depression as well as with other states of suffering. And in our daily life, while we're doing these things in our mind, we also want to try to be helpful to others. In other words, focus on helping others rather than focusing on our own self-absorption. We don't isolate ourselves. When we want to isolate ourselves, when we feel depressed, I mean, if we feel like we want to fall into a hole in the wall, or pull the covers over our head and never move. But we have to fight those tendencies, and we have to actually go and help others, be productive, to the best of your ability. Focus on others, focus on relieving the suffering of others. And this is very, very beneficial. It's creating a lot of positive karma to help you get over the depressed feelings. So we have to work within our mind to oppose the depressed feelings. And we have to substitute these positive ways of thinking in our mind. The practice of patience, love, compassion, and this practice of taking and giving and opening our hearts to receive blessings. And then move into activity. Don't give in to the feeling that you can't move, or that you have to go to bed. So I think, as Venerable Geshe Kelsang says, he says, when a wise person intent on attaining enlightenment encounters difficulties or adverse conditions, he or she endures these without letting them disturb his peaceful mind. And we can gradually get to the point where we can maintain a peaceful mind all the time, even in the midst of suffering. So we have to work towards that. But that's why we practice the spiritual path day in and day out. That's why we want to listen to these teachings. We want to contemplate them. We want to meditate on them. And we want to apply them in our daily lives such that we learn to give ourselves internal protection from the external suffering in our life that none of us can avoid because we're trapped in the cycle of impure life. And then gradually we may get motivated to understand, I can practice in such a way that I can head towards attaining permanent liberation from suffering, not just temporary liberation from a particular suffering, but permanent liberation from suffering. I can use this life to give myself protection for my future lives and strive to attain permanent liberation from suffering in the state of full enlightenment, which will allow me, through the force of my own experience, to benefit others. And I'll have amazing capabilities in my mind to be able to do that. Venerable Geshe Kelsang says, once we are free from self-cherishing, we do not lose our wish to be happy, but we understand that real happiness is to be found in benefiting others. We have discovered an inexhaustible fountain of happiness within our mind, our love for others. Difficult external conditions do not depress us, and pleasant conditions do not overexcite us. That's really important because the over-excitation with pleasant conditions is our attachment. So when we lose them, then we flip over to being unhappy and depressed. For we are able to transform and enjoy both pleasant and unpleasant conditions. Okay. I think that that's sufficient, and that we should have a brief meditation. So let's engage in liberating prayer to create lots of positive karma and to remove obstacles from our mind, and also to, if you wish, to receive blessings from holy beings. And then I'll guide a brief meditation.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to the liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn to you, supreme unchanging friend. I request from the depths of my heart, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you, may all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may holy Dharma flourish forevermore.
Find a comfortable meditation posture with your back straight and your hands comfortably in your lap. And try to think, What in this teaching touched my heart? How did it apply to me? What does your mind do when things don't go your way? Or a problem arises, or you get some bad news. The stronger our unpleasant thoughts and feelings are, gives us an indication the stronger our self-cherishing and attachment is. Our expectation that bad things shouldn't happen to us, which is our self-cherishing mind, and completely unrealistic, sets us up to feel depressed when things don't work out the way we think they should. We need to learn to protect our mind, to gain more control over the way we think. We have to challenge our unrealistic expectations that bad things shouldn't happen to me, or that things should work out the way I want them to. And our unrealistic expectations about getting the things we want, feeling that external things are sources of happiness. Happiness is a feeling, and only our mind can generate happiness. Suffering is a feeling, and only our mind can generate suffering. And we can learn to recognize and reduce our thoughts that generate suffering, and to recognize and increase thoughts that increase our mental peace and thus our happiness. When bad things happen, practicing patient acceptance gives us great protection. If we happily accept things the way they are, keeping our mind peaceful. We can examine painful thoughts that are also occurring. One part of our mind might be generating painful thoughts, but another part of our mind is practicing patience. We don't have to escalate painful thoughts by following our usual thought patterns. We can challenge our attachment to those usual painful thought patterns. And along with patient acceptance, we remind ourselves, I'm not the only one suffering, everyone is suffering. I'm not an exception to the fact of suffering. Naturally, I'm going to experience suffering. Naturally, I'm going to experience disappointment. Naturally, things don't work out the way I want them to work out. And if I have the medical illness of depression, I want to try to protect myself from triggering it. I want to get appropriate medical treatment and take whatever appropriate medicines are being prescribed. I can practice patient acceptance with that as well. And I can think of everyone else who has depression and imagine that I take on the suffering of all their depression, which destroys my self-cherishing, my feeling I'm special. And immerse myself in the belief that I've actually done this so that I can feel joy for alleviating the suffering of so many others. This joy helps me with my own depression. And I've accumulated a lot of positive karma and purifying my mind. How wonderful. And I cannot give in to wanting to isolate myself, but try to help others to the best of my ability. And particularly, I can say no to my habitual depressed thoughts. I'm not going there. I'm not going to think them. I'm going to substitute other ways of thinking, even reciting a mantra, for example. The mantra of all Buddhas, Om Ahum. Reciting that over and over and over again can help us to block depressed thought and brings so much positivity into our mind. And we can open our heart to receiving blessings. Help me overcome these feelings of depression. Please bless my mind. Bestow mental peace. We can dedicate so that we and every single living being can learn how to protect themselves from depression. But most importantly, so that every single living being can learn how to attain permanent liberation from suffering, and lasting pure peace and happiness. We can come out of meditation. So thank you very much for attending this class. I hope it's been helpful to you. And as always, we're continuing to make prayers for you, your family, and everyone's health and safety.